Good morning, senor.
The Mask of Zorro wasn't supposed to survive Hollywood. 3 directors walked away. The budget exploded by $10 million. Sean Connery vanished, and Mexican customs literally held Zorro's sword hostage for 9 days. But somehow, it became a swashbuckling masterpiece behind the cape and mask. Studio chaos, medical emergencies, aroused actors, and a director who called it the worst mistake I've ever made. Here are 20 weird facts about the Mask of Zorro you didn't know, and they're stranger than any Hollywood script. Number 1. Sean Connery vanished like a ghost.
Hey! What are you doing cutting holes in my wagon?
Sean Connery was originally cast as Don Diego de la Vega in 1994, but he mysteriously dropped out of the project, forcing the entire production to restructure around finding a new aging Zorro. Anthony Hopkins was cast just 1 month before filming began. Without Connery's sudden exit, we never would have gotten Hopkins wielding that whip in the iconic cave training sequences. The production team had to completely reimagine the character's energy and approach, with Hopkins' classical theater background versus Connery's suave action hero persona. This last-minute casting change actually improved the film's dramatic weight, giving the mentor role more gravitas and emotional depth than originally planned. Hopkins brought a Shakespearean intensity that made the father-daughter revelation scenes far more powerful and memorable. Number 2. The director called it his worst mistake.
Blood never lies. Zorro.
Martin Campbell turned down the Mask of Zorro 3 times before finally accepting the job. He only said yes after Steven Spielberg personally called and made him sound like the second coming of action directors. Campbell's first night as director was spent with his head in his hands at a restaurant, convinced he'd just destroyed his career by taking on such a troubled production. He literally called accepting the role the worst mistake I've ever made during early production meetings. The film had already burned through multiple directors and was considered a Hollywood poison pill. Campbell was convinced the project would end his directing career before it really began, especially given the massive budget overruns and studio interference that plagued the production from day one. Number 3. $1 million killed an entire vision.
Yeah, when bulls start wearing bloomers.
How much are we worth?
And Robert Rodriguez was originally set to direct The Mask of Zorro with Antonio Banderas fresh off his success in Desperado. Rodriguez's budget request was $42 million, but TriStar's counteroffer was exactly $41 million. Rodriguez walked away over that single $1 million dispute in the 19th of June 96, completely changing the film's creative direction. That $1 million represented the difference between Rodriguez's stylized, grittier vision and the more traditional swashbuckling adventure we eventually got. Rodriguez wanted to bring his signature kinetic camera work and more violent action sequences to the Zorro character. His departure meant losing a unique Latino perspective on the legendary character, which could have brought authentic cultural elements to the story that the final version lacked. Number 4. $10 million just disappeared.
Dressed in black, known as Zorro?
The original $60 million budget ballooned to $70 million due to complete chaos behind the scenes and constant production delays. Sony had to send emergency producer David Foster to salvage the project when Spielberg's team abandoned ship to focus on running their new DreamWorks studio. The cost overruns came from reshoots, location changes, extended training periods for the sword fighting sequences, and multiple script rewrites. Weather delays in Mexico added millions more to the budget as the crew sat idle for weeks. The most expensive disasters sometimes make the best films, but this production tested that theory to its absolute limits. Studio executives were pulling their hair out watching money disappear into what seemed like a bottomless pit of production problems. Number 5. Mexican customs took Zorro's sword prisoner.
Where did you get that?
It's none of your business.
In the 19th of December 97, Mexican customs agents confiscated Zorro's plastic sword and other props for 9 full days, creating an absurd bureaucratic nightmare. Production completely shut down while lawyers negotiated the release of obviously fake movie props. 9 days of a multi-million-dollar film held hostage by customs officials, who somehow thought plastic swords constituted a national security threat to Mexico. The delay cost hundreds of thousands of dollars as the entire cast and crew sat idle in Mexican hotels waiting for plastic weapons to be released. Customs agents treated foam, rubber knives, and breakaway glass bottles like dangerous contraband. The incident became legendary in Hollywood as one of the most ridiculous production delays ever recorded, proving that sometimes reality is stranger than any movie script. Number 6. Grumpy Bob made Hollywood stars cry.
I want you to know
I consider this an honor.
A sword master, Bob Anderson, earned the nickname Grumpy Bob from director Martin Campbell because he absolutely refused to treat any of the actors like pampered Hollywood stars. During their brutal 10-hour daily training sessions, the actors constantly complained about the intensity for 2 months straight, but Campbell admitted there's nobody I'd rather use, despite their whining. Anderson had choreographed fights for Star Wars and The Princess Bride, so he knew exactly what real sword work required. He pushed Banderas and Zeta-Jones through grueling routines that left them exhausted and sometimes injured. The training was so intense that some actors considered quitting the production entirely. Anderson's perfectionist approach meant doing takes over and over until the movements looked natural and deadly. His reputation for being impossible to please actually elevated the final sword sequences to legendary status. Number 7. Anthony Hopkins needed surgery just to say yes.
You should not trade something like that for a mere glass of whiskey.
Why not?
Anthony Hopkins originally refused the role of Don Diego de la Vega because of severe, chronic back pain that made physical action scenes impossible. A revolutionary laser spine operation made it possible for him to accept the part and perform his own stunts. Without that surgery, there would have been no Hopkins, no whip-cracking Don Diego, and no iconic cave training sequences that define the mentor relationship. The operation was risky for a man his age, but Hopkins was determined to take on the physically demanding role. Modern medicine literally saved the character of Zorro's mentor figure. Hopkins' recovery time delayed filming by several weeks, but his commitment to doing his own action work made the performance authentic. The surgery allowed him to handle weapons training and horseback riding that would have been impossible with his previous condition. Number 8. The director was hospitalized mid-production.
Lesson number 1. Never attack in anger.
In the 19th of February 97, Martin Campbell was suddenly hospitalized for severe bronchitis, completely shutting down the massive Mexican production for 4 consecutive days. Hundreds of crew members and actors waited in expensive Mexican hotels, while their director recovered from a potentially serious chest infection, as the budget clock kept ticking relentlessly. The man who had called this project his worst mistake nearly didn't live to finish it due to the stress and grueling schedule. Campbell's illness came at the worst possible time, during crucial action sequences that required his direct supervision. The production insurance covered some costs, but the delay added enormous pressure to an already troubled shoot. His hospitalization became a wake-up call about the physical toll of managing such a chaotic production. The crew worried they might lose their director permanently to the stress-related illness. Number 9. The stars got aroused on camera.
I'll see you tonight.
In a surprisingly candid 2006 television special, both Antonio Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones confessed to getting genuinely aroused during filming the famous sword scene where Alejandro cuts off Elena's dress with his blade. Banderas admitted he was aroused by Zeta-Jones's beauty and sensuality during the intimate scene. She confessed to being turned on by his character's innovative and dominant stripping technique with the sword. That authentic sexual tension translated directly into one of cinema's steamiest and most memorable romantic scenes. The chemistry was so real that it made other cast members uncomfortable watching them film. Director Campbell had to call for breaks because the sexual energy was so intense it was affecting the crew's concentration. The scene required multiple takes, which only intensified their mutual attraction and made the final cut even more electric. Number 10. A tragedy shaped the casting.
My father and I would like you to join us at our table.
Renowned Puerto Rican actor Raul Julia was originally considered for the crucial role of Don Diego de la Vega, but he tragically died before he could accept or decline the part. His death added a somber element to the already chaotic casting process that eventually led to Anthony Hopkins taking the role. Julia's passing forced the producers to completely reconsider their approach to the character, ultimately deciding they needed an older, more classical actor. Death, medical emergencies, vanishing stars, and last-minute replacements seemed to plague every major casting decision on this production. Julia would have brought a different Latin energy to the role that might have changed the entire dynamic between the mentor and student characters. His loss was felt throughout the Latino acting community, who saw the Zorro film as a missed opportunity for authentic representation in a major Hollywood production. Number 11. Banderas created movie magic in 3 takes.
Looks like your own horse, Tornado.
The iconic moment when Zorro confronts Captain Love and sunlight dramatically glints across his sword blade wasn't computer-generated imagery. Antonio Banderas personally suggested the lighting effect and had to carefully tilt the sword to catch the natural sun without breaking intense eye contact with his opponent. He achieved the perfect shot in only 3 takes using precise timing and real sunlight streaming through the set. The effect required perfect coordination between Banderas, the cinematographer, and natural lighting conditions that could disappear at any moment. This was before CGI became standard, so actors had to create movie magic through skill and timing rather than digital effects. The moment became one of the most memorable shots in the entire film, proving that sometimes the simplest practical effects create the most powerful cinematic moments. Banderas' suggestion turned a standard confrontation scene into an iconic image that defined the character. Number 12. The original ending was too depressing.
It would be my pleasure to introduce you both, Accord.
The original final cut ended with Don Diego dying tragically in his daughter's arms, creating a somber conclusion to the swashbuckling adventure. Steven Spielberg and Martin Campbell decided that ending was far too depressing for mainstream audiences, expecting a triumphant conclusion. 3 months after principal photography had completely wrapped, they called back the entire cast to reshoot a happy ending featuring Alejandro and Elena married with their infant son. The new ending required rebuilding sets, rehiring crew members, and coordinating schedules for actors who had moved on to other projects. The cost of the reshoot added millions to the already over-budget production, but test audiences responded much more positively to the uplifting conclusion. The original tragic ending exists somewhere in Sony's vault, representing a completely different emotional tone for the entire film. Sometimes the best endings are expensive afterthoughts that save a movie from commercial failure. Number 13. Hopkins insisted on showing off with a whip.
Do you know how to use that thing?
The pointy end goes into the other man.
Anthony Hopkins became extremely proud of mastering the complex bullwhip techniques and insisted that director Martin Campbell let him demonstrate his newfound skills on camera. The memorable scene where Don Diego extinguishes multiple candles in the cave was actually Hopkins performing the dangerous stunt himself, without a double. A classically trained Shakespearean actor demanded to play with a leather whip like an excited child with a new toy. Hopkins spent weeks perfecting the precise wrist movements required to control the whip's trajectory and force. His enthusiasm for the weapon training surprised everyone on set, as he became obsessed with achieving perfect accuracy. The cave scene became a showcase for Hopkins' dedication to mastering every aspect of his character's abilities. His insistence on doing his own whip work added authenticity to the mentor-student relationship and proved his commitment to the physical demands of the role. Number 14. Spielberg predicted the end of an era.
They have 25, 30 guards at most.
During production, Steven Spielberg made a prophetic statement to Antonio Banderas that proved remarkably accurate about the future of filmmaking. He said, "This is probably going to be one of the last westerns shot the old way, with real horses, real scenes, and no computer-generated imagery. Things are going to change very fast in Hollywood." Spielberg was absolutely right about the impending digital revolution that would transform action filmmaking. Within just a few years after Zorro's release, practically everything was created or enhanced with digital effects, rather than practical stunts and real locations. The Mask of Zorro captured the final breath of traditional practical filmmaking before CGI took over completely. Real sword fights, actual horseback riding, and genuine explosions became increasingly rare as studios embraced cheaper and safer digital alternatives. Spielberg didn't just make movies, he accurately predicted their technological extinction and the end of an entire era of cinema. Number 15. A major historical figure got completely cut.
Some other time, perhaps.
Accomplished Portuguese actor Joaquim de Almeida filmed extensive scenes as Mexican General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, the infamous leader who fought at the Alamo, but his entire substantial role was completely cut from the final film. A major historical figure who shaped Mexican and American history ended up on the cutting room floor due to pacing concerns. Somewhere in Sony's vast archives, there's fascinating footage of Santa Anna that audiences will never see in the theatrical version. The deleted scenes would have added significant historical context to the story's political backdrop and the California independence movement. De Almeida's performance as the controversial general was reportedly compelling and historically accurate, making the cut even more disappointing. The removal of Santa Anna simplified the plot, but eliminated important historical depth that could have elevated the film's educational value. Sometimes the most interesting historical connections are the ones that don't make it to theaters due to runtime limitations. Number 16. Delays cost $3 million in interest alone.
Can anyone tell me what this flower is? I know this scent.
The Mask of Zorro was originally scheduled for release in the 19th of December 97, then moved to the 19th of March 98, and finally pushed back to the 19th of July 98 due to post-production complications. The delay from March to July alone added exactly $3 million in interest costs as the studio carried debt on the massive production budget. That's $3 million literally evaporated just for waiting and missing release deadlines that had been set months in advance. Hollywood scheduling chaos doesn't just waste valuable time. It bleeds enormous amounts of money at astronomical daily rates that most people can't comprehend. The interest payments were separate from the actual production costs, representing pure financial loss with no corresponding footage or improvements to show for the expense. Each month of delay meant paying interest on $70 million while generating zero revenue, creating a financial nightmare for Sony executives watching money disappear into thin air. Number 17. Sony gambled $1.3 million on 30 seconds.
Bury the body. Bag the head.
TriStar Pictures purchased a 30-second advertising spot during the Super Bowl for exactly $1.3 million to market the Mask of Zorro to the massive television audience. This represented an enormous financial gamble for a film. The studio executives weren't completely confident would succeed commercially with mainstream audiences. That's over $43,000 per second of airtime for a movie about a masked swordsman in an era when superhero films weren't guaranteed hits. The Super Bowl ad buy demonstrated Sony's commitment to making Zorro a major summer blockbuster, despite all the production problems and budget overruns. Television advertising at that level was reserved for only the biggest potential hits, putting enormous pressure on the film to perform. The investment paid off when the movie became a surprise hit, but it was a massive risk for a production that had already exceeded its budget by $10 million. Number 18. A Titanic miniseries changed everything.
Do not let the Dons leave the table without you.
Catherine Zeta-Jones was cast in The Mask of Zorro after Steven Spielberg happened to see her performance in a British television miniseries about the Titanic disaster and personally recommended her to director Martin Campbell. She beat out Campbell's original choice, Swedish actress Isabella Scorupco, who had appeared in the James Bond film GoldenEye. One miniseries television appearance completely altered Zeta-Jones's career trajectory and turned her into a major Hollywood star practically overnight. Her casting represented a huge risk since she was relatively unknown to American audiences and had never carried a major studio production. Spielberg's recommendation carried enormous weight in Hollywood, and his instinct about her star potential proved absolutely correct. The role launched her into A-list status and led to major films like Entrapment and Chicago. Sometimes the most important career breaks come from unexpected television appearances that catch the right person's attention at exactly the right moment. Number 19. Television rights sold before anyone knew it would work.
Join us in the courtyard. There's something I would like to share.
Sony Pictures sold the television broadcasting rights of The Mask of Zorro to CBS and TBS for $30 million in a joint distribution deal before knowing if the film would succeed commercially in theaters. They were essentially hedging their financial bets on broadcast television revenue streams to recoup production costs. $30 million for something that didn't exist yet in final form was either brilliant business strategy or desperate gambling by nervous studio executives. The deal guaranteed significant revenue regardless of box office performance, providing crucial financial insurance for the over-budget production. Television rights had become increasingly valuable as networks competed for exclusive content to attract viewers during prime time slots. The advance sale allowed Sony to reduce their financial risk while giving broadcasters access to a potential hit film. Pre-selling broadcast rights became a common strategy for studios looking to minimize losses on expensive productions with uncertain commercial prospects. Number 20. Real history hiding in plain sight.
Smile in the face of my brother's killer while you make your own plans?
The character of Captain Harrison Love was directly based on the real Harry Love, a historical figure who actually killed outlaw Joaquin Murrieta and gruesomely preserved both Murrieta's severed head and his associate three-fingered Jack's hand in large glass jars filled with alcohol for public display. This macabre historical detail is depicted exactly as it happened in the movie's climactic scenes, blending fact with fiction. Real history included the same twisted justice and gruesome trophy-keeping that audiences assumed was Hollywood invention for dramatic effect. The preserved body parts were displayed in California as proof of the outlaws' deaths and to collect bounty money from the government. Love's actual methods were even more brutal than the film portrayed, making the movie version relatively tame compared to historical reality. The screenwriters discovered these authentic historical details during research and decided to include them because the truth was more disturbing than anything they could invent for dramatic purposes. It started as a disaster, with vanishing stars, hospitalized directors, and customs agents holding swords hostage. But somehow, that beautiful chaos became a swashbuckling masterpiece that marked the end of practical filmmaking. The Mask of Zorro proved that sometimes the best movies come from the worst productions. If you're obsessed with the weird, chaotic stories behind Hollywood magic, hit subscribe, because every great movie has secret stranger. Somehow, that beautiful chaos became a swashbuckling masterpiece that marked the end of practical filmmaking. The Mask of Zorro proved that sometimes the best movies come from the worst productions. If you're obsessed with the weird, chaotic stories behind Hollywood magic, hit subscribe, because every great movie has secrets stranger than the script itself.